Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix book review. I'm Liz Booker. As a career Coast Guard pilot, I was aware of many civilian organizations that offered pilots the opportunity to volunteer their time and aircraft to humanitarian missions. In fact, my own novel in progress was partially inspired by this concept. But it wasn't until I became active on social media as Literary Aviatrix that I discovered there were also several organizations who support animal rescue. Those social media pages show wonderful pictures of planes loaded up with animals on their way to find a new home. My guest today is an airline pilot, dog mom, and an affiliate with Animal Rescue Air Services. She is the author of Halfway Home, which launches on June 14th, 2022. It is a children's picture book about a dog's journey to find his place in a happy home. You can find her on her website, erinmurphybooks.com, and on Instagram and Facebook at Erin Murphy Books. Erin Murphy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've looked forward to this for weeks.
I know, it's so exciting. And the book is coming out soon, which is even more exciting. Congratulations on that. And we'll talk all about it. Before we get started, it would be awesome if you could introduce the book and do a reading.
Absolutely. The name of the book is Halfway Home, and it is inspired by my volunteerism with the SPCA in Pennsylvania and my dog Zeke, and how I got introduced to animal air rescue through both of those avenues. So it starts out with a combination of Zeke's story integrated with an animal air rescue true events. So, halfway home, stuck inside an abandoned house was a pack of stray brothers. Paws pounded, legs leaped, and claws collided, except for one. For Zeke, loud noises in small spaces were too much. Window views of the creek and the sky soothed him. Still, Zeke seemed stuck halfway home. Footsteps sounded. Step. Stomp, squeak. He dove into his hidey hole, but a bubble got him busted. Pop. Don't be afraid, a rescue worker named Maeve said. Come, handsome, a happy home is waiting for you. She coaxed him into a crate. The rescue team knew local shelters were overcrowded. So with the air crew, Zeke went. Maeve winked. Let's go. The brothers soared on their freedom flight. The views amazed Zeke. Clouds, crows, a creek. Maeve landed. Rattle, rattle, squeak. And with the caregivers, the dogs went. But Zeke was still stuck halfway home.
Before we talk about all of the inspiration behind it and how you went about creating this story, I want to know more about you. I know you're an airline pilot, but that's about all I know. What was your path to aviation? And tell me about your career.
Okay, sure. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and my love of aviation began right there with their air show. As a child, I would run outside as I saw the airplanes even flying in for the air show 1 or 2 days prior. It was literally a thing. Like I would knock a fork off the table as I was running out. I was very animated. So it was very clear to my parents, we're going to be going to some air shows with this child. So they were wonderful and always took me. And they could really just sense that my interest was beyond enthusiasm. So my father had, through a friend of a friend, found someone who taught some lessons at the local airport. So at 14, I began flying. And my parents did not have a lot of financial means, but fortunately, they were great guides for me and helped me orchestrate a plan. So I started to save my babysitting money and would take the lesson once a month. And that progressed to McDonald's, restaurant hostess. And so I did solo at age 16, the day after I came home from Aviation Challenge Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, which I also did a local fund for.
Stop. I'm so jealous.
It's so cool.
I always wanted to do it as a child. And then as an adult, we lived in Mountain View, California. And my son was 10 and it was next to Ames NASA research. and there was a mini space camp there. And they did like a weekend parent child thing.
Oh,
So I
cool.
got to go as an adult. I never got to go as a child.
So fun though. I loved it. Well, if you can believe it, that was actually my first time flying from Scranton down to Huntsville, Alabama. So I was already taking flying lessons before I had ever been on a large commercial airplane. Like, my family vacations consisted of getting in the car for 3 hours and go to Ocean City, Maryland. We weren't jet setting. So I was already taking flying lessons before I drove a car, before I had ever even really been in an aircraft ever in my life. So I came home from Huntsville, which was a great experience. And a week later, I did my first solo flight at 16. And then I started to I couldn't keep up with the cost of the solo cross countries. And I discussed that with my parents and my instructor at the time. And he said, well, let's just, keep you interested here. And let's just still continue with maybe a once a month lesson. And then we decided that I was going to pursue it in college. So I decided to just save my money towards that rather than, try to keep up with the cross country stuff in my private pilot license. So I did still continue to fly, but it was just more leisurely without a specific goal in mind, which was great because then when I went to college at Daniel Webster College in Nashua, New Hampshire, I still was current, with everything. I knew I'd have to test out a lot of their curriculum anyway. So again, it was more of a financial thing for me. I was really counting every penny. So I did attend Daniel Webster College, and I have a degree in flight operations from there. And I loved their curriculum because they integrated motor gliders and CAP 10Bs. So I got to receive instruction in aerobatics, and then I went on to flight instruct there upon graduation. So I do have my CFI in motor gliders, and I did just do a little bit of instructing, only about 100 hours in the CAP 10B. And they used to buy the French Connections aircraft when they were through with those. So that was always fun. Sometimes as instructors, we would raise our hand to try to be selected to go down to Florida to fly up one of the CAP 10s. So I did get to do that once. And then when I was a flight instructor in college, another woman who was a pilot really got intrigued with the Air Race Classic. I had no idea what that was, and no one in my family flew. I had 0 point of reference of anything aviation. I just knew that I was interested in flying. So she said, do you want to do this air race with me over the summer when we don't have a lot of students?
I am volunteering at this year's Air Race Classic. I didn't know anything about it for years in my flying career either. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I would love to do, but I thought, well, I'll just go volunteer to get like the back end. I call it research for my writing. That's so cool that you did that. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I actually even just right on my desk here. So here's my completion trophy from the Air Race Classic. So we started in Tucson, and then we ended up in Hyannis, Massachusetts, which was great because I had family in Hyannis, Massachusetts. So and then that was only about an hour from Daniel Webster College. So some of the professors and teachers came down. It was a really small, intimate setting at Daniel Webster. And so everyone knew each other, like our professors would have students over for cookouts. So it was a real nice family aviation setting. But I'm really sorry that school has since closed down, but it was a great experience.
Oh, no, that's so sad.
Yeah.
And then how did you get to the airlines?
So I got to the airlines with zero intent on going to the airlines. Once I had done flight instruction, I flew with an airplane I just absolutely fell in love with, and is featured in Halfway Home, the Pilatus PC-12. I flew for a fractional called Plane Sense / Alpha Flying. They do both wholesale and fractional flying for private individuals. And I flew there for 2 years. 9/11 happened then. I was a little bit confused on what my path was going to be. And I have to say, Liz, every time I flew somewhere, even flight instructing, my attitude in my head was, if I just like this is where I'm going to stay. And so I approached every job like that. I never had a job where I felt like I was trying to use that job to get to another job. I just sort of embraced it. I didn't, like I said, I had no point of reference. I didn't have airline elder in my life or a corporate elder in my life saying, oh, well, this job path offers you X, Y, and Z. I just knew I wanted to fly. And wherever that took me, I just felt like I was going to know when I got there. All's to say, every job that I got, I started to get itchy. At the flight instruction, I just started to crave professionalism. What is that all about? So then that led me to the Pilates. And then after 9/11 happened, I was a little bit uncertain. And I did go to the Women in Aviation conference in Nashville shortly thereafter to kind of just get some direction, see what was happening. Is anything happening? Am I staying flying a Pilates forever? Which would not have been horrible to me in my frame of mind at that time. And I just got some more information there, and I just started to kind of look around. And it was that what I would describe as I just started to crave more standard operating procedures. It was cool and all jumping in the Pilates, but sometimes we would fly with someone else and sometimes we didn't. And when there's not a lot of set guidelines, it can get clumsy, right?
That has been an interesting new world to me, flying general aviation, because in the military, we are very standardized. And so I have a very set expectation when I get in an aircraft of how, the crew resource management is going to go and the kind of communications that are going to happen. And my expectations are never met when I fly with another civilian pilot. I'm like, what are we doing right now?
Yes. And I can even remember one of my college professors teaching a CRM, career resource management course that I took in school. So it's like a whole semester long. And at the end of it, we went through all these different human factors scenarios, and we're constantly having conversation about different personalities. And he was trying to explain why psychology was a requirement for us to take, even though we were graduating with a flight operations degree, because of course, all of us 18-year-olds are rolling our eyes like, we just want to fly. Why do we have to take these courses? And he ended it by saying, so you're going to start to embark on your own career. And I want to tell you from my experience, and he flew in the Navy for many, many years. He goes, when I flew with someone else, the number of people that I felt like I was 100% in sync with, their thinking, their planning is one. And he goes, and it was myself. He goes, it's always different. It's always a challenge. And I started to feel that at Plane Sense. It was a great company. I loved the airplane, but I started to crave a little bit more structure. So I started to think about other people that I had known. They were several years ahead of me. They were moving on. And I reached out to a flight instructor of mine that had flown for Cape Air down in Hyannis in Cape Cod area. So I went down to Cape Air and I reconnected with my flight instructor. And I said, I don't quite have 135 minimums, but I'm just trying to see, what direction I'm going in. I just came back from the Women in Aviation conference, and I'm just starting to feel like I'm ready to move on to whatever the next phase is for me. And I thought I'd try Cape Air out. So he said, well, your timing couldn't be more perfect. And I said, all right. He said, well, if you don't have 135 minimums, here's how Cape Air handles it. We'll hire you to fly the postal mail. We have a contract with the postal mail service between Hyannis and Nantucket. We take one of our regular planes and we take the seats out, and you'll probably do 3 to 4 round trips a day. He goes, the only kicker is you have to load and unload everything. I was like, okay, right. So I'm like 100 pounds, right? Maybe. I'm like, okay. And he said, and even more impeccable timing on your half is that our male pilot, MAIL, has just put in his notice. So we are currently looking for someone. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I went back home up to New Hampshire where I was living, got my resume together, drove right back down in my 1986 Volkswagen that, whose muffler was hanging on by a thread, rolled up to Hyannis chief pilot office and introduced myself and let him know that I knew one of their current employees. And within a week, I was moving from New Hampshire down to Cape Cod, and I flew freight and the mail for Cape Air. And then they made a quote unquote gentleman's agreement with me. If they would train me for 2 sessions and pay for my ATP if I agreed to stay for 6 months. And then from there, I would fly passengers. I was like, giddy up. Yeah. Cause I was always struggling so much financially. This was great for me.
That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that was
And I
really.
want to just like highlight too, because you've mentioned them a couple of times, Women in Aviation International,
Mhm.
and what a great community that is for people finding out what the opportunities are out there.
Absolutely. And here's a really interesting piece of information about me and women in aviation, which I really like to share because I think you may agree with me. I'm speaking for you, but I'll just share what happened. So I was surrounded by an 8-to-1 men to women ratio, and
I'm nodding my head already.
yes,
Keep
right.
going.
And I felt the stigma happening immediately. Oh, you're going to get a job. Everyone's just going to hire you. And I was really aware of that. I was just sort of receiving the information. And there was a lot. The woman Amy and I, when we flew the air race, we raised $7,000 from people to do it. To this day, the other my male colleagues that were flight instructors at the time are more than sure that Daniel Webster College gave us that airplane for free because we were girls. It didn't happen. We were literally knocking on doors, introducing ourselves, explaining what our cause was. $50, $20. And I mean, we hustled, we got $7,000 and we were like 22 years old. So there was an animosity going on. And so I was hearing all of that, and all of that was new to me. And so when I went to the Women in Aviation conference, I met up with two other young women who were one who I met in the Air Race Classic, and then another one that I knew from college who was doing well. She was already flying at a regional airline. Now, I had kind of dilly dallied at the Pilatus and at Cape Air, and I wasn't, uh, I wasn't on this airline fast track that I was seeing a lot of, people who went to an aviation school tend to do. And so she was already ahead of me in that regard. And so she introduced me to the gentleman who was at her regional airline doing interviews. And he was like, Erin, I'd love to interview you. I said, okay, great. And so I'm looking at her wide eyed. I'm thinking this is like, I'm anxious. I'm excited. I didn't know what to expect. So he conducts the interview, and I can even see at one point, whoever watches this video can see my eyes. They just start to go down. He's looking at my resume, and I can see he's taking pause. And I just thought, I was a little distracted because I was answering a question, and I just thought, I must have really just botched this or said something wrong. So I felt nervous. And then he just said to me, he goes, Erin, this interview was great. I love everything about you. He goes, you need to come back to me in 6 months or a year because your flight time's too low. Now, all I ever heard up to this point is how women were getting hired with less time, lower time, handed jobs. And here, this gentleman was just saying, "You're not ready yet. I love everything that happened in this interview today, but you need to come back." And I thought that was such a great experience for me because I got to go home and say, I wasn't just handed at any job now. I just had this high mark for myself that I knew that I wanted to have more than the minimums. I knew that I wasn't just being handed jobs. And it was just such an eye opener for me because all I heard was there was so much shaming around this topic. And I just thought, it's not true. I mean, I know there was a small window in the 80s where things were trying to get changed around, and I understand why that happened. But for me, no one was just coming knocking at my door. And here I am at the Women in Aviation concerts where supposedly jobs get handed out like hotcakes. And I was told to get some more flight time. And I thought that was really cool.
It still happens now. And I'm so glad that that's a great story.
Yeah,
Like
it was really good for me as a young woman too. I was like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I didn't get the job.
We earned it. We earned it, everybody.
That's right.
It wasn't just given to us.
Yes, I didn't get the job that day.
Some of us went through more pain than others to earn it.
100%. Oh, 100%. And then that was even it. I kind of looked around the rest of that day, and I just saw all these other different women, and I just saw it in a new light. I really saw it in a new light. So I did go back, and I just kept on working on my flight time at Cape Air. And then, if you can imagine this, I got furlough from Cape Air because they purchased some ATRs to fly out in Guam as a part of Continental Express. So that was really shocking to get furlough from Cape Air. However, I just kept on pushing because they had some operations down in the Caribbean and in Florida, and they were kicking up in Florida because of this Continental Connection partnership. So I just kept saying to the scheduler, hey, look, I know I'm on furlough, but if you go down the pecking order, where most people at that time in their life, they were in their 30s, they had children. A lot of people at Cape Air wanted the at-home night every night life. They did not want to travel, and this was a perfect lifestyle for them. But I was young and single, completely detached. So I just let them know, hey, even though I'm furlough, if you need any coverage in the Caribbean, Florida, last minute, I'm there. Like, I will get on a plane and I will get down there. And so I did do that. And the gentleman that I ended up helping me get hired at Continental Airlines, his name is Hans Mueller. He's no longer with us, but he said that when I came down there, he was so impressed with me. I went down to Florida and I saw him. He was a retired Continental pilot flying for Cape Air. And I went right up to him and I introduced myself, and I was just trying to get to know the Cape Air family down there. And he said when he saw me leave, I no longer had my 1986 Volkswagen. I had a newer one, but I still had a VW, and Hans is part German. And he said, Erin, when I saw you get in that Volkswagen, I went home and said to my wife, we got to have this kid over for lunch. So he invited me over, and then cut to me progressing from Cape Air. I got hired by Chautauqua Airlines, which I did not like very much. I was excited to fly the Embraer 145, but the regional community was not something that I was really vibing with. I didn't like it. I felt like it was Mickey Mouse or something. I don't know. I didn't love it. I didn't. I just found it a little frustrating. I don't know. So that was probably the only job that I had the mindset of, I am counting every single hour as fast as I can to get out of here as fast as I can. So once I started to date my now husband, his father is a retired U.S. Air pilot, and he also used to serve as the senior director of ops when U.S. Air was in their heyday. So he had said to me on a visit to my now husband, we were sort of just dating then. He said, why don't you start applying to the airlines? And I don't know. I just knew there were a lot of people still on furlough, and I didn't think my time was competitive. And he just said to me, I don't know. I think you need to look into it. I think you have more than enough time. And so at this point, I probably was pushing 4,000 hours, and it worked out great, Liz. I got all of my PIC turbine time. I mean, it's like I planned it and I didn't. I got all my PIC, right? I didn't. Like, I had no plan, if you can't tell from the way I'm talking. I got all my Pilatus PC-12 PIC turbine time right away. And then I went to Cape Air. All of that was PIC time. Now, it wasn't turbine time, but all I was doing was racking up PIC time right after flight instructing. And then I went to Chautauqua and I was getting SIC twin turbine time. And so my hang up at the time, and I don't know what the requirements are now, is I was incorrect in fixating on the fact that I thought, or not the fact, the incorrect thinking that I needed PIC turbine time. In the most applications just state turbine time. And so I had a plethora and then just PIC time. I thought, oh, wow, I'm really misinterpreting this. So then my mind was rattling. Well, now I need a recommendation. I went back to Hans from Cape Air and I called him. I said, hey, I don't know if you have a hand in anything at Continental. I know they're hiring. Can you just give me a call back and tell me what you think? And he's like, Erin, absolutely. I know everybody there. And this is when it was more word of mouth. It wasn't really the job fair thing that I think is a little bit more popular now. So through Hans and then two other people that I know gotten hired at Continental. Now, picture it though, Liz. So I'm flying for regional Chautauqua. I lived in Orlando. I'm still broke. I'm over $100,000 in debt. You know, I have absolutely, positively no money. I have a love seat in my apartment and a chair, and I have the twin bed that I grew up with in Scranton. Like, I have nothing, zero. I don't have a computer. So when I was filling out my online application for Continental, I used to walk to the library in Orlando to use it. And I was 26 years old. Like, a 26-year-old who doesn't have a computer today.
Oh, wow.
Crazy. Like, literally, I had nothing. And so it didn't happen immediately. I filled out the application and it took maybe about 6 months to hear back. So I kind of, again, was uncomfortable with that, but it also fed me that same thing that I had learned at Women in Aviation. They're not just, I'm not just getting hired within 1 second because I'm a woman. I'm sitting around there. I didn't know what was going on. It wasn't happening quickly and it wasn't feeling solid. That's all I can say. I mean, 6 months after applying, I thought was a decent amount of time that I was at the point where it's going to go either way. Yeah, okay. I got my first application under my belt. I have, all my ducks in a row for whoever I want to apply to next, or I need to be patient longer. So I contacted Hans again and I just said exactly that. I said, I don't know if I need to be more patient or is this standard? And he's like, it's kind of a little long. He goes, why don't I make a phone call or two and see where they're at, if they're backed up, we can get you some more information. 2 days later, I was out in Dallas doing a MD-80 simulator prep that was designed for continental interviews. And I came home that after Dallas that morning, I got a call from Chautauqua that I was scheduled to go to upgrade school. Okay. So here I am in limbo. And then all of a sudden, right, all these things happen.
And now you're on the fast track.
Finally. I'm either getting hired at Continental or I'm upgrading. So I accept the upgrade because at this moment I just did the MD-80 sim training. And then I went to my interview, and 2 days later I got hired and I called Chautauqua, declined the upgrade, and got hired on the 737 in Houston for Continental. And that was in 2006.
That's so great. And who are you flying for now?
United. Yeah.
And what's your position?
I'm on the 757 and the 767, first officer in Newark, and primarily flying international, which I absolutely positively love.
And are you a first officer by choice or by upgrade? Okay. Tell me about that.
I'd say a little bit more. I'm at the phase now that it is more by choice. I could fly domestic on the Airbus or the 737. I love the international so much. It suits my personality. Even during COVID, when we all went back to flying just a little bit of domestic, that was even more it is a big indicator that no, I don't want to upgrade for this at all.
Yeah, I see you posting, oh, I'm going to be in London. I'm in Scotland now. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that.
Awesome. It's really weird. I've definitely reached a place that, again, I was not expecting. Of course, I wanted to upgrade, and that was something I'd be very proud of. And I'm sure I will still look forward to it. But in all honesty, at this current phase and state of world affairs, there's so much backlog and moving around within the airline with who's training bases, who's getting trained, who's backlogged for training. All of that is just so unattractive. Like, I have friends that have upgraded and they're 6 months waiting for their final FAA check ride. I mean, so none of that really feels totally appealing. And then a really close second to being first place is my book and my writing. I have a lot going on with that. It's taking it's just taking a new role in my life. And right now, I currently can hold 17 days off a month at work, and that allows me to volunteer, to get at the airport when there's an air rescue flight, to go back to the shelter, to foster a dog, and then to write about it. So right now, I'm really content with first officer label. I'm good.
Oh, man. Well, Erin, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that journey. I didn't come up in civilian aviation, and so I'm always so amazed to hear the stories. And I want to actually write a book in a civilian context, the sequel to the one that I'm trying to shop pretty soon for agents, in which, my girl goes through that process herself. So, and I didn't have to pay for flight training, and now I have to pay to fly. And wow, that hurts. And I'm not like, a starving teenager working at McDonald's either. So all of the respect in the world for all of you who paid your way through, who carried that debt, who lived with a love seat and a chair in your apartment for many years to get to a point where you could, go see the world, which is amazing. And it's also a good segue into talking about the air rescue thing. So, how did you get introduced to animal air rescue?
So I was kind of in one of those lulls in life where I just kind of was frustrated with the world. I felt like every time I turned around, I was encountering some kind of a stressful event, either personally or professionally. And so I had kind of dabbled in, even when I was at Cape Air, because it was a motivator for money. I used to volunteer at the SPCA because Cape Air had a lot of really great community connections, and they would pay you. Really inexpensive, but they would pay if you logged wherever you volunteered and you turned it into them, they paid you like $5 an hour. So I know they have a
That's
lot of really
cool.
good Bubba deals going on in Cape Air. They're also very much like Daniel Webster College, very family oriented, and they were always kind of like, don't break the rules, but break the rule. Like, if you were gonna give a positive have a positive impact on someone, maybe, break a company policy or something like that. So they had that really flexible attitude, which was great. So I did a little bit of volunteering there, and that was a little bit of a money survival mode motivation, but something that I did enjoy. All that got shelved when I did, moving from state to state, chasing regional jobs and then getting hired on at Continental and then moving out to Newark. I was always very fond of animals. I had just two dogs growing up that, I was ridiculous with. I was obsessed with them. But in fairness, my parents took care of these dogs, right? I was off to college and everything. I just sort of came home and did the lightweight work and, and then let them do all the heavy lifting. So it was
Yeah,
all
you just played with them, right? Like my
I just played with them.
19-year-old right now just got up and yelled for the dogs. And of course, now I have dogs scratching to get out my door.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you, teenagers.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure I did my own variation of that. And my parents could probably empathize with your position 100%. So I had an affection for them, though. There wasn't a, and what was also really, really cool at Cape Air is that you passengers can bring their own dogs and they don't have to be in a crate. So that was always something that was really special. I'd be flying around along with 9 people, and then all of a sudden something's licking my hand while my hand's on the throttle.
Oh,
I loved
that's
it.
so cute.
It was really, really fun. So that was always kind of just popping in and out of my life. So when I was starting to feel stressed and everywhere I turned, there just seemed to be something negative. Um, it was presented to me to volunteer, that, giving, you receive. I know that I even say it like that, right? It can sound a little cheesy or something that you're just like, okay, yeah. Right. And, or, a little apprehension about it. So I gave it some thought and I thought, I really did enjoy those times that I had animals in my life. I'm going to look into volunteering at the local SPCA. So I did it. I loved it. And two things, Liz. I was a little bit of a wallflower there. I kind of wanted this to be me time. It was for my mental wellness improvement, right? So I didn't want to go in and chit chat. And I know this sounds real negative, but I didn't want to answer any questions about aviation. That was sometimes part of the stress in my life. So I was just looking to remove myself, volunteer quietly, and have a little part in the community, and then head home. So I moved up in volunteer status, and about 2 years later. So I did that for about 2 years, and it was very quiet there. I didn't really socialize a whole lot with the other volunteers. Lots of highs and hellos. I just went in, helped out where areas that needed to be helped, and I just headed home, and I loved it. It was quiet. I enjoyed the ride there, throw on a podcast and music. It was just like 2 or 3 hours that I knew that was just really quiet. I guess that's what I was sort of craving. Um, and I started to volunteer there more often. I moved up in volunteer status, and then it was told to me that I could be of help by bringing dogs home and then fill out a questionnaire about their behavior, because some of the problems that animals run into is that they get adopted without the families, maybe not through any fault of the owner of the families, but they may not really know what the personality is of the animal, and it's not a fit for them or their lifestyle, and the dog comes back. So the more information we can gain about the animal, particularly in a home setting, out of the shelter where they're removed from stress, is helpful. So I had this little kind of intentionally playful nagging game with my husband. The first 2 years that I had volunteered, of course, now I want a dog, right? And he's flying, I'm flying. We didn't have the sweet 17 days a month off that I'm boasting about now. You know, we were hustling. We were hustling and we were like high-fiving in the driveway because we weren't really seeing each other a ton. And we don't have any children. So we would tag along with each other on trips to hang out and stuff like. And then we had a wonderful heyday of like 7 years where we would bid the same layover in Europe and then meet up. And sometimes American and United were at the same hotel.
That sounds like a dream.
It was ridiculous. Like we've done hiking all over Scotland and like we would hike to a certain spot, stop because we didn't have enough time in the layover. Maybe next month bid the same trip and then take the train to where we stopped and then pick up the trail again. So, I mean, we did that for years. It was absolutely fabulous. It felt like a gift. So, of course, that was what my husband was saying. Like, you know, you're going to give all that up. Like you're thinking about when you were 12 and you had a dog and your parents did everything. Like you're not really considering it. So I had this little playful nagging thing that I would say to him anywhere. We would be in the grocery store and I would just turn around and say, do you want to get a dog? And he would just roll his eyes, right? We would get it, right? We would get in bed at night and I would just look at him and say, I think we should get a dog. And he would just be like, nothing. Like he's not really a man of a lot of words. So he would just shake his head and sort of laugh me off. So this sort of became a playful game. However, I had this complete level of comfort with the notion of it. It wasn't happening. And then as I started to volunteer, and then when I was invited to bring animals home to get more info, I'm like, okay, well, they just come home for a night. This is cool. I'm into this.
Yeah. That right? Could work, right?
Perfect balance, right? No big responsibilities, still enjoying them, helping the community even a little bit more, help these guys get lined up to the right home. And I felt like I can remember driving down to the airport, or excuse me, to the shelter. And I really had this moment of like, this is perfect. This is exactly how animals should be in my life. And I went to the shelter and I did some dog walking that day. And so I started to take a couple pictures and videos and I was showing my husband, I said, you know, any of these dogs I'm sharing with you are eligible to come home for a night. I said, what ones are you interested in? And he just said, that dog there, Homer, he's cool. And I had walked this pup named Homer and he was a little hard to handle. He was very tiny. He was little, but he was really spastic. And so the setup at the SPCA that I volunteer at has green in the back and it has some caged areas for animals to be off leash and play in. However, there's also just sort of a loop and it crosses through the parking lot. And so what we didn't know at the time is that Homer was reactive to cars. He's terrified of cars. So every time everyone would walk him for a loop, like he wasn't bad, but he was just, his body language was odd. It was just a combination of excited and retreat all at the same time. So I said to my husband, well, he is a little hard to handle. And it looks like there's a note here that he's reactive to men he doesn't know. I said, are you up for that? You know, this could be like really not the most fun night of our life. And he was just like, yeah. My husband had zero hesitation. I mean, the man who kept rolling his eyes at me every time I said, let's get a dog, was all of a sudden cool, calm, and collect. And I thought, okay, I'm going to ride this. So, you know how marriage is. All right, he's in a good mood. I'm in a good mood.
Yep, I do. I have my own story about my dogs.
Yes, right? I said, okay, great. So I get this little Homer all set up and he's terrified in the car. He drools. When he drools, he makes these beyond remarkable actual bubbles. And I'd never seen anything like it. So when I pulled up to the driveway, like a moment before, I called my husband and I just said, I'm here. And I said, he's not doing well. I mean, he's getting sick in his crate. He's like foaming or something at the mouth. I've never seen this. I don't know what he's going to do. And again, I'm like on the receiving end, I'm receiving calm from my husband. He just says, okay. And so I was nervous and I wanted to get out of the car and like be there while my husband opened up the door and opened up the crate and interacted with them. And my husband did not wait for me for 1 second. He just opened up the door, and he was already leashed in the crate, and he just said, "Come on, bud." And 10 minutes later, my husband said, "I know this is crazy, but I think we should keep him." Now, Liz, I was silent. I just
Aw.
I was silent. I couldn't get over it. I just said, I actually didn't say anything. I had no words. I just said, "Oh my," I said, "Okay." I mean, because I had really just resolved that this was just not happening. Like, how I had described volunteering with animals was how animals fit. Um, and so from there, he got our two schedules and he looked at them. He goes, "Okay, without trying, we would need to board him 6 days a month. But this is without us even trying to orchestrate our schedules." And like I said, we just had a wonderful 7 years of running around Europe together. So if that was going to slow down, that was okay. I mean, we did it. Um, so we both had to go to work, and I went back to the shelter and I said, we're interested in Homer. And they said to me, "That's great. Do you want to adopt him?" And I said, "Yes, but it can't be today." And they said, "Okay, well, we're not a boarding kennel." So um yeah, I know. And so I had no in because I was a volunteer. And
What?
they just said,
Really?
"No, we get 51 dogs in here a day. Any dog that we can move out to a happy
Oh,
home, we're going to go ahead and do that." And Homer's already been having a hard time getting adopted. I said, "Oh gosh, all right." So it was over the 4th of July. John and I both go to work, and they have like a lot of shelters, they have an online system where you can see the image of the dog that is available for adoption. And the second they're adopted, that tech wise, they have it set up that image is removed. My husband and I are both here. We are in lovely Europe. I didn't go anywhere. I was in the hotel. I think I got room service. I checked that website like 10,000 times to see if his picture was gone. So, cut to 2 days later, he was still there, and we went down, and then he was ours. And a few hours later, he was Zeke instead of Homer.
wow. Well, that's amazing. I love Zeke's story and I love the pictures of Zeke. Oh my gosh. So Zeke, you post pictures of Zeke. Zeke has a very distinct look. It's
Yes.
adorable. It's like the ugly cute.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know that's not probably something you would say to a mother, but I feel like you can.
Yeah, his underbite is so pronounced, it's almost shocking. And his one ear up and one ear down situation is when we first adopted him, he was doing great burning his anxiety outside hiking. And so that's something that my husband and I had always enjoyed doing. And now we were doing it like 10 times the amount that we were. And he was improving. It was really a part of his rehabilitation. But he jumped on a wooden log that was rotting, and there was a beehive in there, and he got stung. Like, this is
Oh,
only like 2 weeks after we had him, like 10 times all over. And one was
oh,
in his ear. So of course we went to the vet, and his ear was very swollen. And, he went back for a checkup, and we just said, everything seems fine. He seems to be back to normal, except his ear stays up like that, like 90% of the time. Like, occasionally he flops it down, but it just stays up. And the veterinarian examined it, and she just said, at this point, I think it's just like muscle memory. Like, it was so swollen and everything just flexed up. So that's why ever since the bee incident, he keeps that one ear up, one ear down, which just adds to his character.
he's adorable, and what a great character for this book. And I love, and now I'm starting to see the way in which you wove this into a fictional story. But what we missed was, how did you get involved with the air side of this thing?
So after I adopted Zeke, I was feeling, something that a lot of people feel when they adopt. I wanted to give back more. I started to see a lot of the shelter dogs who could have been labeled as an ugly duckling is not ugly anymore. I saw them differently. I was more compassionate. I was calmer. There wasn't a single pit bull there that scared me. And I can even correct myself on that. Anyone in the shelter world doesn't even call them pit bulls anymore. They call them pitties, to help try to change the outlook on them. And so I started to do more. So that wallflower who used to just sort of go in and go out and say hi and hello to everyone in pleasantries, I got engaged more and I started to participate in some more volunteerism. And during the pandemic, I started to write a silly story about Zeke. He's just such a quirky and awkward guy. And you hear a lot of conversation like this, which I know you're going to relate to at like a dinner party. Oh, he's so funny. You should write a book, right? We've all heard this. And then it goes on from there. So
Yes.
you're
Yes,
right.
this is a theme with all the writers that has anyone ever told you you should write a book? Well, let's do it.
Yes, exactly. So it started personal. I just thought I'm just going to scribble this story down. My husband and I, John, are grounded from flying, and why not do something semi-constructive and whatever. Again, all for my own mental well-being, to do something else while we're in this world crisis. So I write this story down, and at the time I wrote it as a rhyme, and I was still playing with it and reading it to my parents and to my husband, and I thought, well, this might be kind of fun. I wonder if I can have an editor look at this, and then I can have a little book for my family and friends. And Liz, it was just like the flying, like flight instructing. All right, if I like flight instructing, I'll stay here. If I like the Pilates, I'll stay here. Okay, got itchy. If I like Cape Air, I'll stay here. Okay, that was all fun and games, but still itching for more. Okay, get to regional, didn't like it, really itching now, right? For bigger. And so that's how it was with the book too. I just started to found myself online, looking up writing courses. Everyone was going virtual. I thought, geez, well, I can take a writing course. So I studied some courses with Gotham writers in New York City and signed up with a few workshops of theirs.
Excellent reputation. Yeah.
Loved them. They were great. And I did, a little mentorship with them. And then they were starting to offer some weekly free write-ins. And that way I was seeing other people writing in different styles. And then from there, I ended up finding a school called Journey to Kidlit. And they're in Idaho. And I was really impressed with them because their courses were, in my opinion, beyond affordable. I just thought, oh, wow. Okay. So I don't know. I was shocked at how affordable the courses were. And so I thought, all right, I'll just try one. And if it's just not something that resonates or fits with me. But I just found myself enrolling into one after another. And then I started to get to set up to do live critiques. And then through there, I met someone else to do critiques. And so in that critique, my first critique, which, kind of marks you, right? You sort of remember that it's like, your first solo, your first training event. And,
yeah, it's actually scarier than that from my perspective.
I had so vulnerable, right? I said, I didn't know what I was doing, admittedly, but I sort of wanted to improve upon what I was doing. And I was not sure if I have what it took, all of the above, right? It's like the check ride jitters, all of it. So, yes, I was feeling vulnerable. And the woman said to me, so why did you decide to write this as a rhyme? I said, well, I enjoy a play on words for sure. Like playful words is something that is even a little love language between my husband and I. We just say silly rhyme things to each other all the time. We always have. And she said, okay, so rhyme masters need to stay rhyme masters. She goes, there's beats, there's cadences that are so incredibly specific that the average reader doesn't see, but they all like the book because they're there. She said, if you want to go down that road, that is a very fine-tuned, specific skill set that I'm going to tell you is going to take you years to hone. It's like similar to being a musician. It really takes, serious practice. And it was like, okay. She said, so my suggestion to you is you can do that. Or if you want to learn more about that, she said, I would write it in dialogue. And then if you like a play on words, why don't you play with alliteration? And I was like, okay, great balance. However, I rewrote it about 795 times, but that was like my first major rewrite.
Like you do. Yeah.
Right. That's right. And then some, that's probably not even accurate count. It's probably more than 795. So, but that was my first major overhaul. And I did multiple more. And so I turned the whole thing into dialogue. And then I kind of shelved it for a while, and I was taking all these other courses. And so I ended up with, a handful of manuscripts and like a list of other ideas. Um, so I was went back to it during another critique scenario, and they said, why don't you come back to something that you have shelved for a while, because it's kind of nice to take a pause and look at it fresh. So I brought, at the time, the book was entitled Zeke in a Creek. So I pulled out my Zeke in a Creek, and so we were reviewing it together, myself and the teacher, and she said, here's the deal. You have a book that's marketable. We all love books about dogs. Everyone likes a good dog rescue story. And now it's your job to find something to distinguish it. And I said, okay. She goes, it's got to stand out somehow. And if you go back and look at your comp books, there is something that stands out about each of those. Like I was really in love with Troy Cummings' Can I Be Your Dog? That picture book is absolutely fabulous. And I absolutely like drool over Jory John's books like The Good Egg and The Bad Seed. I think they're hilarious. So she also told me to find those comp books and type them out so I can get an appreciation for how few words are in there. So that was something that I started working on. And then I started simultaneously thinking about how I can elevate the storyline or distinguish it. And the first thing that came to mind was I just very loosely heard about pilots and paws. There might have been one or two airline people that I had flown with that had their own plane and shared a story about how they, saved some animals that were going to be euthanized, or they connected them to adopters across the miles with their own aircraft. So that was kind of how I was trying to work in pilots and paws. And then that same feeling came again. I was itchy. No, it's not quite pilots and paws. It's something. And then I thought, geez, when I was in my wallflower mode at the shelter, I loosely heard about someone saying in passing that there was an air rescue flight coming in for the shelter. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And then I kept myself quiet and went home. So really good lesson on boundaries. Sometimes your boundaries are up to too much, right? So, right. I wanted some time to myself, but I kind of limited myself by not engaging, right?
Yeah. So good.
Yeah, the boundary was I had my boundary up a little too hard, or maybe I needed it then, but it was great that it came down eventually. So as that itchiness came, and I'm trying to think about what kind of plane, how could this be in the story that makes it relevant, and all of the above. I just picked up the phone and I called the manager at the SPCA, and I said, I'm a volunteer. I don't know a whole lot of you there, but I am there regularly. And I said I had heard about an air rescue flight, and I said, I'm involved in aviation professionally, and can you please tell me a little bit more about that? And they said, oh yeah, sure. We get 2 air rescue flights a month. I almost swallowed my tongue. I said, what? Okay. Wow. Tell me more about it. I'm so intrigued. They said, yeah, we have some folks down in Louisiana that are paired up with primarily one shelter down there that is just inundated with animals. They don't have a lot of spay and neuter laws in the South as a region. And they have an influx of animals that continuously need to be removed. And we pair up with a company called Wings of Rescue, and they do the flying. And we organize all the logistics of what animals are going to be saved. And then we talk to Wings of Rescue, and then they go down to Louisiana or wherever there's a natural disaster, and we help out. And I said, okay. And then, so I said, can you tell me what kind of aircraft you use? Like, I'm so curious. And then she said, well, it's a cargo plane. And so my frame of mind at that point was pilots and paws, a private pilot aircraft. So I thought, all right, well, I can tell this woman probably does not have a strong aviation background. And since her answer was just cargo plane. So my mind went to a caravan. I thought, okay, maybe they have a caravan.
Yeah, mine too. Actually.
Yeah, I have my car. Right? So it's not, it's not a Piper Warrior with 2 dogs. I said, maybe they get maybe they get 20 dogs or something. I said, all right, well, I also am aware that there are, and for good reason, some jobs at the shelter that are strictly for the staff members. They're not for the volunteers. Like they're just, you need to have specific training for them, or there are legal reasons why you can't be involved with some animals. So I said, is this something that is available for volunteers, or is this, a staff member only situation? And they said, oh no, you can volunteer here. Again, my boundary was too solid. I'm an airline pilot. I've been in aviation since I was 14 years old. I'm in my 40s. Why aren't I at the airport volunteering?
Those moments of serendipity happen when they're supposed to. So
yes, you're absolutely right. Right. And here I am like fumbling and excited to write this book and have it expand. So I said, wow, okay, well, I'm really interested. Like I said, do I need to commit? I'm concerned about my schedule. It's not really, predictable, blah, blah, blah. No, you can come anytime. And this is what I love about the shelter people. They're so welcoming. They're just so non-judgmental from animal to human, happy to have you, that they communicate to the volunteers how appreciative they are of them every single time. And it doesn't sound like fluff. I mean, it feels genuine. It's great. And they're flexible. You want to volunteer for 2 hours a month? Great. You want to be here 20 hours a week? Awesome. Like there's really no judgment. It's such a judgment-free zone, which is
a nice contrast from aviation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, every check ride, I'm judged, I'm criticized, which for good reason, but it's freeing and it felt great. And so I was like, awesome. I said, well, you tell me when and where, and I'm going to make this happen. So my first experience was down in Wilmington, Delaware. And it was 2 years ago when Texas went under some serious ice storms. And then as it melted, everything was flooding. So there was a ton of animals that were displaced. So my first experience was a disaster relief flight. And so it was February, it was freezing. The flight was extremely delayed. It was supposed to be in at like noon, and it was like 7 at night. So I'm getting emails from the SPCA, like, we know this is your first flight. This must be really frustrating. I'm like, oh, please, I can roll with this. I get it. This is my whole life, like delays and, weather and all this stuff. I said, I'm fine. I'm home. I'm available. My husband's home. He can take care of the dog. I'll be there whatever time the plane comes in. So I get there and it's dark out, and we're on flight aware. Like we have a tail number. So we see it coming in for landing. And I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, what is that? Is that the plane? Like, because it was just a huge, in my mind, huge aircraft for a rescue flight. So this Brasilia rolls up, and then they open up the cargo door. There's 200 cats and dogs on this plane. Like the whole inside is gutted, and they have them stacked on crates. I just thought, at least from an airline perspective, nobody knows this is happening. Everyone that I fly with now that is even willing to listen to 3 seconds about my book, they all look at me sort of deer in headlights, and they're just like, wait, what? Like how often?
I have a rescue scene.
Okay.
In Louisiana in my novel.
Oh, great.
And now I'm thinking we need at least to see some animals in this scene, because I don't have that now.
Got it.
And just hearing you talk, like, I didn't know this.
Yes.
I've got some Civil Air Patrol in there. I've got some of my search and rescue background in there, sort of the humanitarian stuff that I talked about in my introduction, that people can volunteer their flight time in their aircraft to support rescue efforts. But now I'm feeling like, I've got another revision before I send it off to find an agent. So I'm thinking we're going to need to see some animals. This is amazing.
It's incredible, Liz. I mean, for me, I guess I was just so blown away at the magnitude, the frequency, and combined. Now, in the animal rescue world, people kind of seem to be in the know about this, and not that that's not a big community. But I mean, as far as like corporate sponsoring and things like that, and then also it even gets bigger than that. The ultimate goal is to increase the spay and neuter laws in areas that it is just not present. And this is off the cough a little, but it's no, I'm not 100% the reason or factual. Like I'm not speaking in absolutes here, but a piece of the information that I was given that the reason that this is happening is because budgets fall short in states. And so things that get cut are funds to implement spay and neuter and animal welfare care. So really interesting pieces of information that people can resolve whatever they want. The number 2 state at present to euthanize animals is Texas. And to me, surprising, the number 1 is California. And so if that holds right,
yeah, actually, you just,
take a minute.
I was not expecting that.
Right. Just take a minute and digest that. So I was shocked at that too. And the reason for that is, well, if we're going to, play with this hypothesis, if they don't have money, we know California is very much as a state in bankruptcy and struggling. So it's getting cut. So that sort of just feeds into that information that was given me. I mean, it's kind of like think of it as a little bit of a hypothesis, but if I'm going to look at it from that standpoint, that's what's going on. So until that can be rectified, there are nonprofit organizations also that I've learned about in addition to Wings of Rescue. So Wings of Rescue, I love the founder and CEO. This guy, Rick, is so cool. And I talked to some people at the SPCA, told them I was trying to improve upon this plot that I was writing for a book. So now I'm becoming more involved and sharing people with what's going on. They said, we should talk to Rick. He's the CEO of Wings of Rescue. I said, oh, okay. Do you have like a phone number? They're like, you know him. He helps unload the animals. Oh, he's on the flights. I said, oh, okay. I had no idea. So I talked to Rick. Rick is originally from France. He's a man of many talents. He is so interesting to me. He lives out in LA, and he is a former music producer for the hair band Poison, Joan Jett, Ted Nugent. Like he's a total LA music scene person.
That's a lot of interesting connections.
It is. And then he just was really passionate about animals. And then he started to, he knew, I guess someone else had been in charge of Wings of Rescue, and then he ended up taking it over. And then additionally it's not a children's book. It's a little bit more of a sex, drugs, and rock and roll book, but he also has written a book and is published with like Harper and Collins. So as soon as I told him about the book, he was like, really supportive, really cool. So we haven't paired it up yet, but I think it's going to happen probably this summer. But he's invited me to tag along. He's like, if you want to do some more writing, he goes, come. He goes, just get down to Louisiana where we start out. And then, you can sit in the flight attendant jump seat and come back. So I haven't done that one just yet, but super exciting. Yeah, Liz is like, I totally want to go on a flight too.
He will do it. It's research. I'm just saying.
Yeah, he will do it. He has, and that's the other thing that's cool. He has other, so Wings of Rescue charters planes from an on-demand charter company called Berry Aviation.
No, this is good. So I wanted to hear the nuts and bolts of this. So like we've covered so many topics that are going to be of interest to different populations, writers, aspiring pilots, dog lovers. So like this has broad reach potentially, but for the pilots who are already qualified or retired or whatever, who want to get involved, or people who own aircraft, like I want to hear about the nuts and bolts of like how this works.
Okay, so all the private pilots that are interested, I would go to the Pilots and Paws website. They have an open forum on there that lists that people that are working at shelters that know about animals that need to be moved so that they're not euthanized, animals that need to be moved because they need to be flown to a medical facility for specific treatment, and to people who say, hey, I saw this picture of this dog online, little Homer, he looks so cute, but he's in Pennsylvania and I live in Ohio. Is there anyone around who is willing to fly him? And for all the pilots listening that are in a position where they're looking to fly, this is a fabulous tax write-off. And so is any donation to any of the 501(c) nonprofits that are air rescues. So that would include Wings of Rescue. And through Wings of Rescue, I met Julian Javier. He is a 29-year-old gentleman. He's flying a 414 and sometimes a Caravan. The 414 is his, in California, and he's flying animals up to Canada. Liz, I've seen pictures of this repeatedly. Canada's spay and neuter laws are so strict, their shelters are empty. And the images that I have seen are people at the airport when Julian lands, families, literally, they have signs and they're like cheering. It's like an air show. There's like 100 people there and they're all in line to try to get first dibs on a dog. So this is why they're so motivated to do it, because there are places that will take animals that are in jeopardy of being euthanized. Like they're at the airport begging for it. So that's why they're driven. They said, if we can continue to raise funds, we're happy to fly the aircraft. And there's, because there's a debate. Well, there's just too many dogs or there's just too many deers. You got to shoot them. Okay. But if you want to try something else first, there's this wonderful opportunity. So that would be through Pilots and Paws would be a little bit more specific. And then
so Pilots and Paws. So if you're a private pilot,
yes,
and you are looking to build flight time,
totally.
Is there a way that helps the pilot themselves?
Oh, I think so. Sure. If you can,
do they have aircraft that the pilots can operate?
You need to have your own plane.
Okay, so you have to. Okay, that's important.
Pilots and Paws is your own plane.
Okay.
Yeah. Pilots and Paws is your own plane. And then, so Pet Rescue Pilots is a nonprofit. They have their own plane. And then, so they're just, continuously asking for any kind of form of donation, whether it be sharing the information with someone or a monetary donation. And I have to say, Pet Rescue Pilots in particular has really caught my attention because all of them do it, but they do a really great job. If you donate $5, they make you feel like you just donated $1 million. They make you feel valued, because I know the word donation can make us feel something, right? Sometimes there's a visceral reaction. It's either, oh, I wish I could. I don't have any money. No, I hate my job. It doesn't pay me. And you go down this whole thing. Or I've worked really hard. I'm in a financially secure situation. And every time I turn around, somebody is trying to take my money, right? So that can play in both of our heads. So what they really present the information as, what I've really tapped into too, is, donation can be your time. It can be your skill set. It could be going to the airport, helping unload and offload animals. And as far as Wings of Rescue goes too, they very often have young aviators, like Rick, the gentleman, Rick, who is the CEO. He'll invite young aviators to come on the flight. And that way they can sit in the jump seat and watch the pilots. They can get introduced to the pilots and maybe see what it takes to get on a place like Barry Aviation and do, start a little networking. He's going to put you to work to help you load and offload the dogs. But usually most people who are on board, literally on board are on board for the animal aspect.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, what better appeal is there to get involved than having, these sweet animals who need a home? Yeah, absolutely.
And then they get to meet, and I loved, like, anytime that I was working at the airport, I loved kind of keeping I would just say like my left eye, because if I'm offloading, from the cargo doors, I was always I was a little wallflower then too. I was watching the pilots, and they are hustling. I have so much respect for them. I remember what that grind is like.
Loading the mail,
all of it. Yeah. Sweating. And then the 135 stuff and looking at the clock and weight and balance and, running in to check on the phone and trying to find a piece of pizza or Snickers bar somewhere. I'm watching them do all that. And then now for them, after we get all the animals out, they go out there with a mop, because of course it's horrendous. Yeah, they are just busting it. They're really working hard. So I'm really proud of all them too. So then I guess from Wings of Rescue, I was introduced to Pet Rescue Pilots out in California, and those two know each other. In fact, I even had a layover in Los Angeles, and I had lunch with both the founder of, or the CEO of Wings of Rescue and the founder of Pet Rescue Pilots. So they're, supporting each other in the same, realm. So that was really great to be able to meet up with the two of them and learn some more. So in that lunch conversation, um, Julian, who is the founder and CEO of Pet Rescue Pilots, so he's 29, and he was kind of just trying to decide again, is this where his flying is for him? Like he has another professional job. Is this just where aviation is for him? Running his nonprofit and flying. However, he's just getting tired. I mean, he's also working very, very hard most of the time by himself. And he's not getting paid. Like he's just, he's raising funds, but it's just to pay for these things. So he was feeling a little bit depleted in that department, which I can completely understand. So we were having a little discussion about it. And then he asked me, kind of like you, like, what was your aviation journey? So I started to talk about the Pilatus and how fond I was of it. And then Rick, the CEO of Wings of Rescue, interjects and he goes, "Oh, Wings of Rescue owns a Pilatus." And so at this whole time, I still had not committed to an airplane in the book. I kind of went back to the Caravan because that was my first thought. And I just wasn't really in love with the look of the Caravan.
Come on.
I know.
It's a hard-working plane.
How could I say that and have a guy like Zeke, right? I should be able to see through that.
Right.
I mean, I thought that the Caravan's super great utility-wise. I mean, it's going to get it's a workhorse for sure. But I wasn't in love with it for the book. And so I again almost swallowed my tongue and I said, "Rick, oh my gosh, tell me more about the Pilatus. Like, is that just way too small to house everything from Louisiana?" He goes, "Yeah, that's why you never see it. We do, some smaller operations with it." And then he's like, "Yeah, it's on our Instagram. You'll see pictures of it." So that was what sealed the deal for me. I had a personal connection with it. And then once I saw all the imagery with it, working on behalf of Wings of Rescue, I was like, the Pilatus is going to be the plane for halfway home.
That is just so great. All of that is so great.
The third organization, real quick, is Pilots Rescue. They're on the East Coast, and they do solicit other pilots to do flying for them. So again, it would be your own airplane or someone who, like the gentleman who runs that, his name is Michael Schneider. He did start flying for Pilots and Paws, and he would rent an airplane. He just had to be obviously forthcoming about what he was going to do. And he put like a tarp down, and then ended up making sure the plane was extremely clean when he was done. So if you don't have your own airplane and you do want to get involved, it would just be, it would just take a little extra prep, for the animal or whatever. I haven't really seen anyone even really talk about any like horrendous horror stories. I mean, most of the time they're in a crate. If you feel comfortable taking them out of the crate. You can always size them up though. You can tell if one of them is just overexcited and it's not a good idea. Or, I've even flown on a rescue with Michael, and, there was a smaller dog that was just chill, and we took him out and he sat in my lap the whole time. So it's doable.
Yeah. And I think I saw a post somewhere about altitude and the effect on animals too, like the things that you have to consider for them compared to humans on board. And just a really interesting little niche of aviation that I didn't know about. So what did you hope that this book was going to accomplish?
I really wanted it to, two things. I thought it was a really great time in the world to dismantle maybe some of our preconceived notions about how we all look and act. And so I thought I would use Zeke as that. He can be judged for good reason really quickly. He's odd. He does not fall into the standard, "Oh, hey, there's Fido, let's go pet him on the head." He doesn't even like anyone to touch his head. He's kind of introverted. And I thought that was, I could use dogs to communicate all of us being, a little bit more open and receptive to someone who is different, which I know is such a common theme, but gosh, it sure seems like we all still need reminding. And then second was the air rescue. I just thought but a whole huge part of even aviation don't even know that this is happening, not nearly to the magnitude. Like, oh, you fly a couple dogs. So just Pennsylvania alone, if we're talking about, say, on average, 150 dogs a flight twice a month, throw in a couple of hurricanes in the fall. I mean, there's just thousands and thousands of animals. That's just to Pennsylvania. There's a lot of animals that come out from Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, a ton of animals out of Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and then California. So they're off. There's just so much movement going around, and all these air rescues could use support. Again, in whatever way that suits you, your time, your energy, share it, tell someone. It doesn't mean that you need to cough up. I'm not asking anyone to cough up $100. But if you do, again, it's a fabulous write-off. Like, so for example, I know Pilots to the Rescue on the East Coast, if you were to sponsor a flight with him, it's generally would be a $2,500 venture for him. So he has a Saratoga.
Oh, see, that's really helpful information. That's good to know. So you can sponsor a full flight.
He can. You can. And if you do, and you really want to get involved, I mean, contact Michael. You'll be on the flight with him. And I have to say, Michael's team is top notch, and they make you feel top notch. And he is extremely intelligent about from a business standpoint, who he's trying to get on board. He likes to, I flew with him because I won a contest, and in our conversation down there, he said he likes to invite women that are in aviation in some manner. And he said, and my biggest attraction to that is they tend to post really great content, and there's a softer approach, and they're a little bit more compassionate. And the men that I have hosted are fine, he said, but it feels a little bit more of just like a business transaction. Like, hey, I gave you $2,500 and now we're going to go do this flight. And he said the women there's just more of a compassionate approach. And he goes, and for me, and I saw this with him. He was sharing about different pilots he was flying with and asking me like, oh, do you know this woman? She's on Instagram. And I was really excited to fly with her. And she gave me some really good tips about trimming the aircraft to be a little bit more efficient. And her and I were talking about, loading the Garmin up for an ILS and what some of the hiccups are that can be with that. So what I really enjoyed about Michael and specifically was that he was still very open to learn. And when he was flying with another pilot, he brought you in on what was going on, and would even just run something by you. You're like, hey, do you think this is the best idea, or should I just park right here and let this guy go? And he just has a really relaxed attitude, which is really interesting to me, because in contrast to that, what I started to say, his team that meets you at the airplane makes you feel like $1 million. Like, I kid you not, he has like a little red carpet for when you get out. There's a team taking pictures of you, and he ends up putting together this video of your experience with him, and they make you look like a rock star. He really does like such a good job with it.
That is so brilliant. I mean,
it is
experiential charity. Like, seriously,
yes.
like,
yes, it's great.
No matter why you're doing it, whether it's because you love dogs, whether it's because you want people to know that you're giving, whatever the reason, it's just righteous, no matter how it comes out. And
exactly.
And how brilliant is that to create, not just like give me money, but like come for the flight, be with the dogs, get your picture taken, post it for me. So brilliant. It's good. That's good.
It's fabulous. And to those that live out of town, so I drove up, I live 2 hours away. He resides in Brooklyn. So he will put the person who is coming up, if they're out of town, he puts them up in a hotel in New York City and then gets them down to the airport. So they go home. So even if he fronts like a couple $100 for that, and you don't have to, but a lot of the people will run a fundraiser on behalf of them. And then I was riding high from that easily for 2 weeks. I mean, I told everyone and anyone that would listen, I was shoving my camera in everyone's face. Look at me, look at this dog. I'm in the plane, I'm taking videos. I was thrilled. And
where do we find this guy? How do we find do you have the website information?
I do. And then that was the other last tie-in for the book is I was so passionate about having a back matter sheet. So everyone that I just
good.
is in the very last page, their website and contact information. And the last two that I added in there is a company, a rescue platform called Cuddly that integrates their charity work with numerous shelters that rescue animals that are in serious crisis. And they are hard to look at. It's painful. It's like the Sarah McLachlan that comes on at Christmas time that we all turn our heads from the TV because it's upsetting. However, if you hang in there, they do these things called pup dates. The transformation of the dogs is undeniable. They have wish lists online that say, this dog needs $8.97 ointment. Click, shop, send. So the wish lists are what really attracted me because you know what you're buying, it's going to the specific dog, and it's not like your money's floating out in space, and it's so budget friendly. Like we're talking $80 to $150 items. So it's just, and again, they send you this warm, wonderful email. They give you updates on the dogs that you bought things from, so you know where it's going. It's not just going into like money cyberspace. And I don't know, I guess I just donated. So I love Cuddly, and Cuddly's founder also has an extremely interesting story. He's a former NFL referee who met some dogs, changed his life, jumped ship from the NFL, and now runs Cuddly. And then the last one is Marley's Mutts. Marley's Mutts is a gentleman who is in personal recovery. And again, just like when I got Zeke, now I don't see any shelter dog who I probably would have turned my nose up at before as anything but wonderful. And that is exactly what he is doing. He has animals in prisons in California, and they stay there. And he's designed a curriculum for inmates. And the inmates, once they satisfy this curriculum, and if they satisfy it, they don't pass everyone the first time. They get a good citizenship certification. And then upon release, they have a skill set. They have somewhere to go, somewhere to start. And if you're going to get turned away for being a felon, they encourage you start your own dog walking business, start your own business, do a dog daycare at your house. So you have a starting point of something. And the compassion that comes out in these gentlemen that are in prison with these animals is remarkable. So that's all stems from Marley's Mutts, which is also in the end of the book. And they also have fabulous wish lists for their animals that are adoptable or in need of medical care. So the wish list people for sure are the Cuddly and the Marley's Mutts. And Marley's Mutts, the gentleman who owns that's name is Zach Sco. He's also really, he's also on the board and supporter of Pet Rescue Pilots, the young gentleman who's flying primarily up to Canada. So they all are connected, big family. So they all know about each other, but I just felt like there is still a whole audience they haven't reached yet. Like I would love for them to get like a commercial or, something.
Absolutely.
Right. It needs to reach the rest of us in aviation. They have a huge community supporting them. Like they're raising millions of dollars to do this, but I just think that, I don't know, or just at least, even if it's not from a financial standpoint, I just think people need to know that this great work in animal welfare and aviation is going on.
I do too. That's so amazing. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, and follow me at Literary Aviatrix on social media. Visit the Aviatrix book review website to find hundreds of books featuring women in aviation in all genres for all ages. And join us in the Aviatrix Book Club on Facebook. We have a monthly reading list set for the year posted as the banner picture, and virtual meetings posted as events. Everyone is welcome to join the discussions. Blue skies and happy reading.
And here I am, I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to say